Hi, and welcome to Unit 4. And this week we are going to be mainly focusing on learning favorability coding and computing favorability scores, as well as, you can see here on the student notes, as well as graphing favorability or means by item and graphing dimensions by demographics. So being able to split this up and look at it in more detail. And this is going to be really important because you're going to need to do this next week in the case study with a new data set. So last week you learned how to compute the dimension for each competency and to graph that. And when you're putting a survey report and putting it all together, that's going to be the first piece. The next piece is computing favorability, because favorability is sometimes easier for non-statistical people to understand than means. And then you want to be able to obviously graph those and then split, what we would call split the data by items or by demographics. So this typically happens when you have a lower competency, say like compensation. We want to know which item is the lowest. Is there one item pulling it down? Or is there a demographic? Maybe it's women that are experiencing this and not men, so we just want to dig a little bit deeper. So we're going to go back to the lab file that we used. And you can find this in your Unit 4 under the on-ground lab. And I've just pulled up the notes, of course, which I'm going to go by, and the data set. Okay, so when I open up this week 4 lab data survey data file, I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, it has been set up properly here already, and this is from some of the work we did last week. But I just want to note you're going to need to do this for your homework, for homework 4, and for the case study. And then just note that everything has been recoded properly. Gender has been recoded 0 and 1, and we can look here and see women are 0, men are 1. And we can see the coding for ethnicity here, and the coding's been done here as well. So one important thing that I think I may have forgotten to mention in the video last week is after you recode something to, from words to numbers, you have to recode it here in transform recode. But the minute you're done doing that, you need to go and put it in here, copy and paste, to have a really good system of knowing what this is, and also to help label your charts properly. So what I want you to notice here is it's been converted to numbers, all of it, and it has been set up properly. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to transform these PCQ, which is psychological capital questionnaire items, into favorable and unfavorable. And typically you have a favorable, neutral, and unfavorable, but to save time, we're just doing favorable and unfavorable here. And this does not have a neutral scale. So you can see that 1, 2, and 3 are somewhere on the scale of disagree, and we're going to call that unfavorable. And 4, 5, and 6 are on the agree scale, and we're going to call that favorable. So we have to recode 1, 2, and 3 into a 1, and 4, 5, and 6 into a 2. Okay, so let's do that. Just sort of showing you where I'm getting this from. So I'm going to say transform, recode into the same variable. Now, one thing I would do is label this data something else if I'm going to transform all of the items this way. So I'm going to come here to the left, select PCQ, hit my shift key and the down arrow to get all 24 items over. All right, so I'm going to click these items over, and I'm going to go into old and new values, and I'm just going to do a range here, and I'm going to say 1 through 3 is now a 1, and 4 through 6 is now a 2. And I'm done. I hit OK. And we look on the data, and that has happened. There's nothing there that's not a 1 or a 2, right? But it hasn't altered these. So unlike Excel, it's keeping these averages. Okay, now what's really important is I need to come right back into here and say, actually 1 is unfavorable, change, 2 is favorable, change, and 3 I'm going to remove, and 4 remove, and 5 remove, and 6 remove. That's now my new coding scheme. I clicked out, and I'm going to right click and copy, and just down to here, because these are still on the other scale, so I want to leave that. Okay. So I've done the first step of favorability coding. Okay. Now, the next part is before we compute favorability, we have to count it. And so right here, we're going to learn how to count values within a case. And this is just how you get favorability. Okay. So in creating the count variables of each dimension, we have to count the number of favorable and the number of unfavorable and the total count, because then we're going to do a formula to divide by that. So for the first one, and I think the first one is self-efficacy. So items 1 through 6 are self-efficacy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to transform and then count values within cases. And I'm going to create a variable called, I'm just going to do SE for short for self-efficacy, count, and then I'm going to do favorable. This is, you can do it any way you want. I think actually I'm going to do all lowercase, and I like to do the unfavorable capitalized. You know, you would put your appropriate label here, but we're not going to really be showing this, so you don't have to worry about it. Let me move this over so we can see this. All right, so we're going to select these 6 variables. And we want to count it, if it's favorable, we want to count it if it's a 2. So if there's a 2, I'm saying, hey, look through all of these and count if there's a 2. I'm going to say okay. Now let's look at what this looks like in the data. So it's gone through for each person, and it's counted up the number of favorable for items 1 through 6, right? For this competency, because SciCap is made up of 4 competencies. So if you don't remember from last week, the first 6 items are self-efficacy, the second 6, I believe, are hope, and the next 6 are resiliency, and the last 6 are optimism. So those are my dimensions or my competencies here, and I'm just going to count count it up. So I also need to count unfavorability. So I'm going to do transform, count values in case. Now, I'm going to put this in all caps so it's easy for me to know which one's the negative one. I leave these items in here, but I change the define. So I've got my 6 items in here, but when I click define values, I'm going to put a 1 in here because now I care about the 1 and I want to remove the 2. So now it's going to go through these items and count the number of times there is a 1 or the number of times there's an unfavorable response. Okay, here's my item, and you can see, and as we would expect, there's a lot less here, except this person who's really upset, and this person. So here, not upset, but I'm sorry, I should say low in self-efficacy. Okay. And it should add up here, right? So it should add up to 6 because that's a total. So now we're going to do the total item. So I need to have something to divide it by. I'm going to do the count values within cases. And I'm going to do the total. And I'm going to define the values. And so I'm going to add back this 2. I want it to count a 1 or a 2 so we get the total, which we know is a 6, but I just need I need a column there saying 6, okay? And then after I do this, I need to do this for each scale, but what I'm going to show you next, so hopefully this makes a little more sense, is computing the variable. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to transform, compute, and I'm going to call this self-efficacy favorability. I'm going to spell it all the way out. That's just sort of my note for myself so I know that it's not the count. It doesn't have count in it. It's spelled all the way out so I know the difference because you can get confused. Okay, and so how I do this is I divide, this is going to equal the favorability count over the total. So I'm going to scroll down here and say, put the favorability divided by the total, and that is the percent favorable. Okay. Now, I need to do this again. So the percent, this is 100%, 83%, 33%. Now I need to know the percent unfavorable. So I'm going to do the same thing again. But I'm going to change this to unfavorability. And I'm going to change this item out to the count of unfavorable. And hit OK. And now I have the percentage of unfavorable. So when I go to graph this, this is going to look great. So in order to get the favorability and the unfavorability, I end up making 5 new variables. And I have to do this for each competency. And this is going to be a lot for your next homework, especially because you also have to calculate a neutral, right? So I'm going to do this again. So the next one is hope. So I'm just going to go through count values within cases. Now, I'm going to swap these 6 items out and move to the next 6 items. Three, 4, 5, 6, and move those over. Now I need the hope count favorable. And I'm going to define this by a 2, which I already had in there from the other one. But if I were to reset it, let's just say if I were to reset it, I'll show you again in case that's confusing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is called hope, count, favorable. Define the values. I'm just going to put in a 2 and add it and hit continue and OK. And now I have a hope count for favorable. I need to do the same thing for unfavorable. And so I need to remove this 2 out and add a 1 in because I want it to count the unfavorable scores. Hit OK. All right, and this looks good. Everything looks like it's lining up. Now I need the total. And this, I want it to count both values, so I'm just going to put that 2 right back in. And here we go. I've got the 3 that I need to make the calculation to compute the 2 variables. So I'm counting to make 3 variables, and then I'm going to compute 2. Transform compute. And I'm going to call this hope favorability. Notice I don't have count in it. And I'm spelling it all the way out. That's just the notation to myself. Equals hope count favorable over the total. Okay. And that's come out nicely. Although, wait a minute. Yeah, that's right. That's 100%. 83%, 50%, and so on. Now let's do unfavorability. And here I'm just going to delete out this one and put in the unfavorable count and click OK. Okay. So as you can see, I now have 2 variables, and for the length of this video, I'm just going to keep it at 2. You're going to have to do the rest to finish out your lab, but what I do want to turn my attention to is graphing the favorable and the unfavorable. So here I'm going to go to Analyze Descriptives and Descriptives. So I'm going to pick these 2 and these 2. And under Options, you want to make sure you hit Sum. You don't need these other things, just the sum. And you can, I don't know if the descending means it's going to work here because it's just a sum, but we'll see. Okay, so now I'm finally using this output. So we want to copy these numbers over to Excel. And if you're wondering where I'm coming from, so we've gone through counting, we've gone through computing, and now we're going to, we're doing this right here. And I've skipped to step number 2 because we're already in SPSS. Okay, so we'll follow these steps. So I've copied this. I'm going to go into Excel. I'm just going to paste this here. Again, these are my background numbers. And I'm going to shrink this so I can read my instructions. Okay. So it says create a table in Excel. And we want the row headers are competency, favorable, whoops, unfavorable. And then if you had a neutral, which you will in the homework, you'd put a neutral, right? So I'm going to label this self-efficacy and hope. And to finish out your lab, you will do resilience and optimism. Those will be your other two. And then okay. Now the next step is use these numbers to fill in my chart. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just make a little, this is where we use our formula. I'm going to, it says go back to these numbers and divide them by the n and then multiply times 100. So I'm going to go equal this number divided by the n times 100, right? And then I'm just going to pull this down so it does it for each one. And that's my percent favorable that adds up to 100. And actually, I probably shouldn't have done descending. I probably should have left it because now this is a bit out of order, but I'll just pay attention. So here, then I can just type in self-efficacy favorability is 89.69. And the unfavorable is 7.83. And for hope, the favorable is 85.96. And the unfavorable is 14.04. Okay, so that's what my kind of my background data looks like. Okay, so I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to hit Insert Bar Chart, and I'm going to do either a 2D clustered or a stacked. Either one would look great. And I think maybe I actually want it by, I want it switched, but I'll do that in just a minute. I'll do it this way first. I'm going to get rid of this chart title. Okay. And then I'm going to right click on this and select data. And right here, I'm going to switch row to column because I really want self-efficacy and hope to be the main show here. And so if I just to show you the way it was, if I switch it back, it's kind of comparing what's favorable, and you have to look a little harder to see the competency. So I think it looks, and you should turn it in like this. Okay, then I'm going to right click and add data labels. And these are a little hard to see. You could either bold them, you can move them a little bit. Just make sure they're kind of centered and they look good. But yeah, I might, if it were me, I would bold these, make them slightly bigger. And this, if it's small like that, you can just, yeah, like that. Make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Now we also need to do the same for this one down here. Add the data labels, and then you can make that look better. Okay, so now when you're doing it, you're going to have all four bars for all four competencies. Okay. Now, there is another way that you can do this in SPSS. Oh, wait, I needed that output. So I'm going to run this again because I don't like that I did it descending. I'm just going to do variable list so it keeps them together. Okay. This is a bit tricky, and I'm going to be honest with you all. I don't ever do this without looking exactly how to do it on this sheet. And actually, it's not on this sheet, so I think I'm going to just skip over it. It might come a bit later. Oh, no, this is for items. Okay, so this is splitting for items. No, it is here. So this is where I'm at right here. So I am following this to the T because this is so difficult. I could never remember how to do it. Okay, so let me do this so you can see this at the same time that I'm doing it. Okay, so to get to graph by items, so let's see, hope is our lowest one. So let's say we want to look at the hope items and say, well, what's pulling hope down? It's the lowest one. Or, you know, you could also look at the best one and say, what item are you doing the best on? Either way, but we typically look at what the problem is. So you're going to go to, and the first thing is the labels must be exactly the same and they all must be ordinal to work. So let's look at variable view. Wait. So these are all no, let's see. Oh, it's the items, right? So for a minute, I'm going to make all of these ordinal. Copy. I'm just going to come down for the 24 items and make them ordinal. And you have to do it in order to do this trick I'm going to show you in the chart. Okay, so that's the first thing you do. And then you're going to go analyze, custom tables. And this is saying, hey, you better have it all lined up in make it ordinal. Okay, so I'm going to select the first 6 items. No, we're going to do hope. I'm going to select 7 through 12. And I'm going to drag these to the rows right here. Then I'm going to change the category position. Here it is. Whoops, I lost my cursor. Okay, so this position to row labels and columns. Whoops, come on. No, where is this? Oh, here, I'm sorry, category position here, row labels and columns. So that's the first step. Then I'm going to change the summary stats to row in percent. Whoops, over here. Row in percent. I'm going to click this over. I believe I clicked the count out. Row in percent. I'm going to hit apply to selection. I'm going to hide the column headers. I'm going to click this button right here. And I'm going to click OK. Okay. Now I'm going to double click on this table. And I'm going to go up to this right here, this pivot. And I'm going to select transpose rows and columns. So I know a couple of you were asking about your Mac when it came out the other way. And I said this week we would talk about how to swap it. And I couldn't remember, it's under pivot. Okay. Next, I'm going to select all the data here. Right click, create graph, bar, So now we've just done this for the items. Now I'm going to double click on the graph. I'm going to double click on one column. And then I'm going to go to this variable. So this should come up. And it might take a couple of times, especially if in your Mac, to get this right, but this should come up. Variables. And so I've clicked on this tab variables right here. Under column, which I'm having trouble finding, select stack. Okay, it's actually under the statistics. Whoops, I'm going to click stack. So right here, oh, you know what? I feel like I missed a step. I think this is actually the stack. Sorry, the row should be the stack. And the statistics should be change to x-axis. And hit apply and close. Okay. On the chart under options, select, click on the chart under options, transpose chart. Does it side? Now I've done something wrong because these are the same color and they shouldn't be. So let me go back and do it one more time. Let me actually delete this chart. Okay. I feel like I've missed transposing it in some step. Let me look here. I feel like this. I'm missing some steps here. Okay. So I'm going to select all of this again. Right click, create bar graph. Create graph bar. Okay. Double click. Double click on one bar under variables. And it says I should see a column. Let me try it with just the stack and apply. There we go. I think I had an extra step in there. Now I'm going to do options and transpose. And that is how you do it. So I just had an extra step in there. And I'm going to fix this so you can see. But what I did, just let me do it one more time so you can see. I double click on the chart so I can access the data. I select all the data, right click, create graph bar, double click on this, double click on one item, on one bar, click on variables in this tab. Under statistics, I just want to select stack, apply, close this, and then go to options and transpose chart. Right, and that makes it a little bit easier to see. Now, of course, with any chart, you're going to double click, put your data labels on there. Right, and this one's not 2 decimal points, so I'm gonna under the numbers, I'm gonna put 2 decimal places. Okay. All right, so now this is how you make a chart by item. And the last one I'm going to show you is by demographics, which is a bit easier. That's the tough one. Okay, so all right, so we're just going to do the first one. So if we wanted to, let's see, do we want to do, let's do a whole dimension by demographics. So I'm going to do this one right here. This is for one item, and this is for a whole dimension, and then this is looking at 2 demographics, but we're not going to do that. That's a little complicated. All right, for this, we're going to do, let's see, what are our demographics? Let's do ethnicity. Okay, so we're going to go graphs. Let me move this over so we can see what to do. Graphs, legacy dialogue, bar. Now we're going to move here and click clustered. And then we're going to change it up to summaries of separate variables. And hit define. Now, so we're going to put ethnicity in the category axis. That's what it's going to split it by. And then I'm going to go back. I'm actually going to use the mean, not the favorability, because that's going to look a little bit better here. And so I'm going to do, we might have to have more than one. Whoops. Yeah, so you have to have more than one here. So we might look at all of them and hit OK. And this is actually not coded well. Let's do gender. So something's up with that. I think I had a problem with my coding. Yeah, it's all 6s. So there was some problem with that. So let's just do gender. Let's do graphs, legacy dialogue, bar. It'll all remain the same for me there. I'm just going to switch ethnicity out for gender so that you can see what it should look like. And so here we see women and men. And we can see that women are a little bit lower in PSYCAP than men, except for an optimism. No, in all of them, really. No, except for resilience, right? So let me double click and put my means on there so I can see for sure. Okay, they're kind of tied there. But anyway, so you can get an idea. So that's how easy it is to do by demographic. Okay, and that's all I'm going to go over tonight. I hope this is helpful. Reach out if you have any questions. Again, viewing this several times will be very beneficial. Thanks for listening.